Hello YouTube, this is Cole, the Sqaures and Gears channel. Today we're working on bicycles. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but on my page, my previous channel name was actually Bicycle Guy 111. I changed it to Sqaures and Gears, being that most of my content is hot rod stuff. I'm very lucky to do hot rods, but hot rods are expensive and not everybody can do it. They're not accessible to everybody. Something that might be accessible to everybody is the bicycle. The bicycle, in my opinion, it's one of the purest forms of just pure mechanical efficiency. And you can make little changes and really feel a huge difference. So it's pretty cool. My daughter's 2 years old, and I love getting her out in the garage, showing her bike parts, showing her how things fit together. You know, just obviously the rudimentary basics. What we have today is a 1968 Raleigh Superbe. So this style of bike, it's a 3-speed English bike. It's got some modifications done to it that I did recently that we'll go over. But essentially, it's what the English would call a roadster. The bike was originally equipped with fenders, a 26 by 1 3/8 tire and rim. Pretty cool, pretty efficient. So Raleigh marketed these bikes as the all-steel bicycle. And if you're not familiar, Raleigh at one point was one of the world's largest bicycle manufacturers, and they cranked out millions of these things. And you can get them really, really cheap if you want a cool old vintage bike that you can actually ride, enjoy, you know, do 10 miles on, do 20 miles on, whatever you want to do, commute to work. These bikes are a great option. They're fairly simple, but they do have some mechanical quirks. So being that Raleigh was one of the world's largest bicycle manufacturers, they did have some proprietary sizing. So the threads here on what we call the headset, or the bearings in which your steering assembly rotate on, the threads are proprietary. The bearings in which your crank rotates on is what we call the bottom bracket in the bike world. So this guy right here, those threads are also proprietary, and they're specific to Raleigh. They're very common, at least they were, but nowadays modern bike shops really aren't equipped to deal with them, and they don't really make a lot of replacement parts. What I've done here is I've converted this bike over to what we call a Sqaure taper crank. I got some parts here, for example. So these are the components that make up your typical old school, what we refer to as an English bottom bracket. Typical English bottom bracket is a 24 thread per inch at a 1.37 diameters. So pretty simple, pretty easy. You've got 2 bearings. You have 2 cups, one for either side. Here's the kicker. Your drive side cup in a standard English bottom bracket is left-hand thread. Your non-drive side cup, the non-drive side cup is standard right-hand thread. You can see this one's going to use a spanner type wrench. This one's going to use a larger standard style wrench. Now, open-ended wrench, With this setup, your drive side cup is referred to as the fixed cup, and you're basically going to bury this in the frame. You're going to tighten it down as tight as you can go. There's a torque spec for every bike out there. I'm not sure what it is. And your non-drive side cup is going to be used for adjustment, fine adjustment, and dialing in your bearing preload. Your lock ring here threads onto the end of your non-drive side cup and allows you to lock that adjustment down. Now, this is the crank and bottom bracket spindle that my Raleigh was originally equipped with. This is what they call a cotter pin style crank. Pretty obvious. It's a spindle that's cut for a cotter pin. You can here see the corresponding hole that the cotter pin would fit in on the crank and lock that into that spindle. This is really antiquated stuff. I believe this design dates back over 100 years. And Raleigh continued with this design because it was very robust, very simple, reliable. But I wanted to shed some weight on the bike, give it a little more performance. and step it up to an aluminum crank. So I upgraded to this Nervar Star crank from the early 70s. I put a new chainring on it. I'm going to run this bike as the 3-speed, so I only needed one single chainring. This was off of a 10-speed style bike, so it had 2 or even 3 potentially from the factory. But here in this setup, it's going to be a single chainring. Anyway, there's a lot of different ways you can go about fitting the Sqaure taper spindle that this crank uses into the old style bottom bracket. Now, like I said, the biggest problem is those proprietary threads that Raleigh used. Instead of a 24 TPI by 1.374 or 3/7 inch, they used a 26 TPI. Now, I could, and I have the tooling to cut down that bottom bracket shell in width a couple of millimeters and retap it for a more modern bottom bracket. It's really not ideal on these frames. There's just not a lot of meat in there to do that. So what I ended up doing was using a later 1980s Japanese spindle, Sqaure taper spindle, going across there, and I used the factory style 1/4 inch loose ball bearing on the factory cups. So I was able to kind of cobble this together. It spins great. The bearing preload adjusted very well. The old school European cranks adapted to and fit on the Japanese Sqaure taper spindle, no problem. So, and then these are just some Amazon pedals. So anyway, yeah, it's just another sort of mechanical hurdle you have to get through, but it's a lot of fun in the process. You know, I like I said, the bicycle is one of the purest and simplest forms of just mechanical efficiency, and you know, you can hot rod them just as easy as you can hot rod anything else. I did refer to Sqaure taper, the term Sqaure taper. As you can see, here's an example of a Sqaure taper spindle. The interface is square in shape, and it's tapered to wedge that crank arm on there real tight and to have efficient power transfer. These require a puller. You can't just unbolt these things, you have to use a puller. So anyway, now I'm working on truing the wheels, getting them all straight, getting them nice and true, both laterally, side to side, and radially. So we're working on that. These things have not been touched in probably 50 years, so you know, dousing them in penetrating oil, getting all the spoke fasteners or nipples nice and easy to adjust. And we're going to do a little bit of a rebuild tune-up on this old internal 3-speed hub. Really simple stuff, but a lot of fun. We'll clean it out, we'll grease the bearings, fill it full of a very light gauge oil. It already works, I've tested it. We're also going to change the rear cog here to a larger cog to re-gear the bike, just like the transmission in a car or on a motorcycle. Essentially, these hubs are going to have a first, second, third gear, and they're stepping up. I have to look at what the gear spread is. I can do a video if you guys would like to hear about that, but I'm effectively going to change my final drive via changing that rear cog. So pretty cool. It'll be a fun little bike. I bought this thing for $60. I paid about the same for the new tires for it, but overall it's fairly inexpensive. That's a Brooks Professional seat. That's kind of a fancy seat. I also got that off OfferUp or Facebook Marketplace for a steal. So the whole thing's fairly budget. It's nothing is expensive on here. Nothing's really fancy. It's all just kind of cool, old school stuff. I may end up putting the fenders back on it. They're pretty beat up, but it might kind of make a cool patina bike. I've done tons of polishing and cleaning up on this frame. When I got it, it almost looked like gray. It was just extremely dry. The paint was faded and just had no shine to it at all. So pretty exciting, pretty cool. Let me know if you guys want to talk about bicycles more. Let me know if you don't. I've been watching a lot of Path Less Pedaled and all sorts of retro bicycle stuff, and I just kind of reignited my passion here and Just wanted to do something easy and fun. All this stuff is just stuff I've had floating around my garage, other than the bike itself. So, to me, it's all fun. So anyway, guys, don't have too much fun out there. See you later.